The Las Vegas Raiders cooked this offseason. This is Check the Mic, 33rd team. So I was doing a little research in the NFL, looking at some stuff, looking at some rosters, looking at some projections. I'll tell you this. I kind of sneaky, high-key, low-key, low-key, high-key think the Raiders are very quickly relevant. And this is a team that has been irrelevant for a long time. And last year, I thought they had the worst coach in the NFL. I was making posts on the Raiders subreddit about Antonio Pierce and how many games he cost them. Absolutely was lost with the GTO and just any kind of decision making at all. The Raiders very quickly took the most important positions and upgraded them massively. Geno Smith, who I have as a top 10-ish quarterback in the NFL, somewhere in that 10-11 range, and Pete Carroll, who is the old, yes, but he is a guaranteed guy who can come in there, create a culture, create an identity, and give this organization something to build on. The worst two things the Raiders have had for a long time now is the quarterback position and the coach. And now both of those in one offseason is fixed. And around them just so happens to be Brock Bowers, one of the best pass-catching options in the NFL, our best young pass-catching options in the NFL. Ashton Genty, one of the most prized or heralded running back prospects in a long time. They have a true superstar in Max Crosby. This team might be okay.
So they get Geno Smith in the building, draft Ashton Genty in the first round. We broke down their draft last year. I called it the most interesting just because the mix of players, the Jack Bash, Dante Thornton combination.
Yeah, Jack Bash. A lot of people love Jack Bash coming into this draft, including me.
Right? You've got the physical second-round receiver in Bash. You have the deep threat in Dante Thornton, plus the size that he brings to the table. So really love that. Love what they're re-signing Max Crosby, by the way, just making sure that he's there for the foreseeable future, I think is a part of this offseason as well. And then a couple other moves, trying to get them. Alex Kappa wasn't great last year in Cincinnati, but bringing him in on the offensive line where he's had success in the past, trying to get the best out of him, get him back on track, bringing in Jeremy Chin in the secondary. I think there's still more work to do in the secondary for the Raiders. Again, we're not talking about a one-year rebuild here, but as far as
let me make this clear. I'm not saying the Raiders are going to compete for the AFC West or compete for the AFC or win 12 games, but the fact is now that they have immediately built a foundation. And this is a team that won 4 games last year, a team that has been bad, a team that has been maligned, a team that has been rudderless, a team that has no identity, a team that has no vision, they're just guessing, whether it's with McDaniels or Pierce or Minshew or O'Connell or Carr at the end of how bad that was. This is a team that's been floating around. And now, regardless of the results, because again, to say, yeah, they'll win 9-10 games, that's a bit much. But regardless of the results, this is a team that very clearly knows what they're doing and very clearly is trying to set forth a path. And I think they have the pieces to be relevant as soon as this year.
Some of the offseason additions, starting with Geno Smith, they're going to be more competitive.
Yeah.
The story here, though, when we were fixing every team in 5 minutes before they made this trade, when we were doing those moves, I said punt on this year. I know Pete Carroll's getting old, but let's do a culture play. Let's get Spytech, 12 picks, and let's just think to 2026. They're not doing that, and I know Raiders.
Remember, no team ever does that. Remember, that's always fugazi, okay? Why would you do that? It's not that easy to say, well, just punt on this year. Brother, you have Max Crosby now. You have him now under contract. You've got these guys now, all right? I'm not saying go all in, but the idea of just take a year off, punt. It's no team should ever do that. What they should do is exactly what the Raiders did. Go get you a coach, go get you a quarterback, and build through the draft. Sweet.
Fans, they're like earmuffs here for a minute. There's some similarities to when Dave Ziegler took over 2022 season. I said the same exact thing. Raiders punt. The Chiefs are the top dogs in this division.
Yeah, but he Carr in 2022 and Geno is way better right now. So it's not the same as like Carr and Adams and all that. Not to mention like, yeah, I just don't think that's similar at all.
Division. Try to compete in a couple years. And they said, nope, we're trading for Devonte Adams. We're going all in with Devonte Adams and Derek Carr. And clearly that didn't work. So there's elements of that, right? Which is like, let's compete right now. But I don't think the Devonte Adams trade, though, kind of mortgaged a bit of the future for the now. I don't think the Raiders are mortgaging the future for now.
Well,
but they're trying to do both simultaneously, right? Rather than a full, like, let's just.
They're kind of doing what the Saints do, is that they're stabilizing and saying, look, we're not mortgaging the future. We're not, we're not in a win now kind of situation, but we don't want to be a trash can. We don't want to be a laughing stock. We don't want to be 160 points negative in the point differential. We want to be relevant. We want to compete. We want to build something. And when you're looking around the room, you have Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers and Jack Besh and Michael Mayer and Jacoby Meyer, and you got some of these guys, and Geno Smith is there and Max Crosby's there. Like, okay, all right, we can build something here, man. If you look at the roster, look at the PFF grades up. Geno look at this. Like, this is a big difference. Aiden O'Connell was 36th out of 42 quarterbacks. Okay, was really bad. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. He was really bad. Geno was 9th last year in PFF. Now, again, this is like 10th, somewhere in that 10 to 9 to 11, somewhere in there. But that is an enormous jump at quarterback. The most important position in the NFL. You don't have PFF grades for coaches, but Antonio Pierce would have been dead effing last in coaches. Pete Carroll, is he Sean McVay? No. But he's absolutely, if they had a PFF grade for culture and identity and all that, Pete Carroll would be really high up. Okay. Then, you have Jacoby Myers, 27th out of 133. Jacoby Myers, I think, is very serviceable. Jack Besh, we'll see what happens, but a lot of people like him coming into the draft, including me. Ashton Jeanty, same thing. Ashton Jeanty, who knows? He is as big of a prospect as Bijan Robinson was. So let's just say you get similar production out of Jeanty that Atlanta gets out of Bijan. Okay, you can put a pretty solid PFF grade next to Ashton Jeanty. Michael Mayer has been, I guess, maybe disappointing. I guess you could say, but he's still an option, right? Brock Bowers, the opposite of disappointing. Brock Bowers, if he had WR next to his name, would be talked about all over the place. He'd be talked about just as much as Malik Neighbors is talked about. And Brock Bowers is awesome. He is absolutely sweet. He is as good as it gets as far as a tight end, young tight end. Couldn't ask for more. Especially, and that he's doing that with Aiden O'Connell. Okay, you go down the list, keep looking around at some of these grades here. Defensively, same thing. Not much to write home about, but still, like, you have Max Crosby, and this isn't a team where I'm trying to make the case that they're going to win the Super Bowl. This is a team that I'm trying to make the case is going to make an enormous jump from being 4-13, 0-6 in the division with a negative 125 point differential. Right, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if this team made a jump into that 7-ish win. I would think Geno is at least going to increase them to that 6-7 win, maybe 8 win mark. 8 might be a lot, but depending on Ashton Jeanty, if Ashton Jeanty is really good, then I could see a 4-win jump. But just on the surface, just taking Antonio Pierce and Aiden O'Connell out is such a net positive. We look at some DVOA stuff here. Now, DVOA doesn't really tell us much because so much is different, right? Like if you tell me this is defensive DVOA, so the Raiders were where are they? 18th last year. If we go to offensive DVOA, they were probably pretty damn bad, if I had to guess. You don't get to 4 wins with a negative point differential like that without being really bad. And they were 29th, yeah. But you say, okay, they're 29th last year in offense. Like, I know. That's why they went and got Geno, and that's why they got rid of Antonio Pierce. Not that Antonio Pierce was an offensive coach, but it just tells you how bad the Raiders were and how rudderless they were. This is an enormous change, an enormous difference for this team. And if I was a Raiders fan, and a lot of people say Las Vegas is my third home. I love Berries. I love Andiamo. I love Circa. Love it. Okay? Love the place. if I was a Raiders fan, I would feel really, really good about the immediate future.
Just punt. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I think they're more competitive this year. The most important thing, though, for the Raiders is let's be competitive in 26 and 27 and make sure that the pieces are in place to compete then.
And let's not overlook, by the way, the first signings, right? The Pete Carroll, John Spytek dynamic coming in to be the new regime. I mean, this was another team that kind of, voluntarily 1 year GM and got rid of him, made a change right away, even though unusual to get like a 1 year, one and done GM, but they were like, no, like firm, hard stop. Let's completely move in a different direction. Pete Carroll, really interesting hiring because of his age, in Seattle, I think it was a reasonable call to move in a different direction, just because I think he'd reached that point where it's at least a justifiable argument to say he's still a really good coach, but like the message has grown stale. Just change for change's sake can have a positive impact. Now, that's dangerous because change for change's sake can always get a lot worse as well. But
yeah, the grass isn't always greener for sure. But I do agree. I think Seattle and Carroll, I think it was fine that both of them, or I guess Seattle, agreed, like, all right, we probably need to do something different. We need a new message here. We need a new identity, new culture. Let's build it now. I don't think it's saying anything horrible about Pete Carroll. Just is what it is.
I think it's at least an argument that's reasonable. But I think he's still a really good coach. He's shown multiple times that he's able to like reset the culture of a building, to build a program, whether it's college or the NFL, and move things in a really positive direction quite quickly. So Pete Carroll coming in, I think, will make a significant difference. And then Geno Smith, look, we can debate what he is, but he's not a bad quarterback.
I think it's crazy that people are ranking Geno or even considering Geno as being a bad quarterback. I mean, like, tell me you haven't been watching the NFL for the last couple of years. If you're still thinking like, oh, well, Geno Smith is Geno Smith. Geno is, he is in that fringe, like I said, 9 to 11, 9 to 12 kind of quarterback. He is absolutely a guy. I mean, we still have people who probably think Dak Prescott is better than Geno Smith. Like that's just kind of how it is in today's day and age. But I think Geno, especially, and again, it's not just Geno in a vacuum. It is Geno's upgrade from Aiden O'Connell, who, like we saw in PFF's grades, was as bad as it gets. So when you are upgrading that severely at the most important position, oh, baby. Oh, and, like I said, you have a ton of weapons. Like the Raiders sneaky have a ton of weapons in their offensive room, and they're all young. Whatever you think about Michael Mayer, fine. But you have Michael Mayer, Jack Besh, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, and a good quarterback who is leaps and bounds better than the previous guy. Sounds good to me.
Good quarterback who tends to play quite badly in the red zone, which, like, completely candidly is a very big problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's, in terms of weaknesses to have, that's a really unideal one.
Not a great one.
But that doesn't mean he has no business, being a starting quarterback, or he doesn't do an awful lot of positive on top of that, right? Geno Smith, particularly, again, remember how bad that interior of the offensive line was for Seattle. Geno Smith is a phenomenal upgrade over anything the Raiders have had for the last several years. Is he ever going to be in that top 8 category that we keep talking about is the target? No, probably not, right? And that is a weakness. Like he will get you quite far in terms of upgrade, but he's not the answer necessarily long term.
But he's kind of like perfect for what the Raiders want to do. He's not the guy who's going to elevate you to a Super Bowl, but the Raiders aren't trying to win a Super Bowl right now. He is the guy who can elevate your play to that stable, whatever, second tier level of quarterback, which is what the Raiders are trying to do. They're trying to elevate themselves back up to being 500 or above 500, which is exactly what Geno can do. So it's a perfect marriage, I think, of a quarterback who knows what he can do and a team that knows where they want to go.
But he is a phenomenal upgrade. He makes them immediately competitive. And that is why I think you're seeing the approach that you talked about. They don't need to strip it all back to the bare metal and rebuild from the ground up. They can do this competitive rebuild because Geno.
Every team, like, this is the blueprint. I'm telling you, the whole tank, that whole idea, like, it's just not a thing. The competitive rebuild is the move. It is the vibe. That is the way to go. We have seen it time and time again. The rip it down to the studs and all that stuff, that's just is so 2000 and late.
Smith makes them competitive, and they can now start adding pieces around him, and they can win games next year.
Yeah.
Tom Telesco, he meant like one and done, weird GM hire. He had just been fired by the Chargers. GMs are rarely hired for a second time. Just the way Thomas Dimitroff was talking about that recently on our friend Ross Tucker's podcast. It's just not a common thing, right? You see retread coaches all the time. Telesco comes in for 1 year. He did leave a couple nice parting gifts, though, in Brock Bowers and Jackson Powers Johnson. His first two picks, Bowers at pick 13, JPJ, a guy that we were saying, hey, if Seattle at pick 16 last year would have taken him, we wouldn't have thought that was crazy. I think he backed that up in year one, that he's going to be a good player. So, yeah, there are some pieces here for the Raiders who I think are moving in the right direction. And a big part of their offseason is, yes, Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, John Spytek, right? We're counting that, I think, in this, resetting the organization and in the way they've done things as
yeah, I mean, we'll see with Chip. I'm hesitant to be like, oh, this is a huge upgrade. Oh, this is, you always wonder. Chip coming back into the NFL. Yeah, it was cool in college. We'll see. I like Chip Kelly, but that is certainly, that's more of a question mark than like the Pete Carroll or the Geno Smith.
As part of.
But on the surface, you give Chip Kelly these toys. Okay.
Them having one of the better off seasons here.
They managed to bring back Malcolm Kuntz as well, who's a guy I thought would more than likely escape them in free agency and get signed somewhere. That was a really nice, sneaky, not addition, but like a retention.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. I mean, again, my concerns, I was wondering if they would be in the Jalen Ramsey sweepstakes, like if they're really going for it. That's not part of the long-term plan, but if they're really trying to be competitive this year, I think they have one of the worst on paper cornerback situations.
Yeah.
I wonder if there is more to do post free agency here for the Raiders, but I like the direction that they've gone in. And it wasn't exactly what I had predicted, but I like the direction and think they're certainly better for this season.
That's a good shout as well. Like, as much as the majority of the offseason is finished now, we've had coaching carousel, GM carousel, the free agency period, the draft. There is this period, this like second free agency period, right? Where everyone's roster then settles. We see what they've done in the draft. We see the undrafted free agents they signed. And then you get to say, well, what's the last thing we need to fill before we get into the season? And we have all these sort of remaining free agents that are still out there waiting for the phone call, or, maybe the trade deal that can happen based off everything settled. There are still moves to be made, and moves that will be made that, will impact NFL teams heading into the season. I mean, this is the time-ish when James Bradberry ended up going to the Eagles and being a really big part of that team a couple of years ago. Those types of moves are still theoretically out there.
Yeah, I mean, we keep hearing the same names now. Let's see, Asante Samuel, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Jalen Ramsey. Like, it's the same kind of handful of names of like, okay, well, where are we? Okay, is somebody going to make a move here? Is there going to be a shift? Is there going to be a domino fall?
I'm going to call this the James Bradberry period. That's my most famous, most impactful one. A massive need that year for the Eagles at corner. They got him for pennies on the dollar and with no future compensatory pick ramifications. That's the other benefit of the signing the veterans right now. So, or guys who have been released like Bradberry was.
Thanks for watching all the way.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. But I think the Raiders are a team to watch for sure. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying they're going to win the AFC or whatever, but they very quickly catapulted themselves into that conversation of 500 or somewhere around that, which for them is an enormous jump. I mean, if the Raiders win 8 games, that should be an enormous success. Doubling your wins, like taking a step forward, realizing the gains and the values from young players. But yeah, I mean, I like what they're doing a lot, and they've kind of done it under the radar. Very difficult division, obviously, but I think they're going to be much more competitive than they've been, because you can't enter that division. You can't have Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, and then you roll in there with Aiden O'Connell, and you're like, all right, let's rock and roll. Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, and Sean Payton versus Antonio Pierce. That ain't going to work, right? But now Geno versus Justin Herbert, Geno versus Bo Nix. Okay, Pete Carroll versus these coaches. All right, he you know what you're going to get. So yeah, I love it. But let me know in the comments what you think about, especially if you're a Raiders fan. What is the vibe over there? Are y'all feeling good about this? Are y'all all in? What's going on? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.